In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to get Don Toliver styled effects for your vocals. Before we get started with this tutorial, I want you guys to keep in mind that this song right here is just a rough mix. It's not a full mix. So obviously consult your mixing engineers for all your mixing needs. But the purpose of this video is just so you could apply certain effects so you can kind of hear when you're recording the style of the vocals that you want to achieve. Within all the Don Toliver mixes, there's always a lot going on, whether it's like transitions from one part of the song to another. So that's what we're going to be going over in this video. Last thing, remember, it's presets, Goobster room tutorials all day. If you want to learn how to achieve a similar style effect as some of your favorite artists, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll get to it because we don't do presets anymore. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tutorials because we are most definitely going to be doing more of these. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get straight into it. Here we are in the session. The song is called Pill After Pill by an artist named Cypress. Okay, one of Mike's homies right here. So let me just play a little bit of the song so you guys can kind of get an idea of what it sounds like, and then I'll go into the breakdown of everything to achieve those Don Toliver style effects.
Chop off the top, call it Sleepy Hollow. I was on my way, she said, baby, how long? Rock star like she from the hills. Take this tan rock, tell me how it feels.
Alright, so that should be a good general idea for what the song sounds like. So with Don Toliver's vocal mixes, there's always, again, a lot going on. I want to start over here in the pre-hook. If I solo this out, all we have on it is just the regular lead, right? So it's processed normally how you normally would process a vocal, right?
Chop off the top, call it Sleepy Hollow.
But if you see, or if you could hear, we have a reverb on it. So that's the first thing that I want to get into is the reverbs that Don Toliver uses. So it's different between like the pre-hook and the hook. I use two separate reverbs. When you're trying to achieve these Don Toliver style effects, you have to know that in certain sections, like on the hooks, sometimes he will have way more reverb than he does on his verses. So it's always changing. So this vocal right here that we have highlighted right here is being routed to my leads bus, and then this is where I do all my lead processing. So this is just simple. However you choose to process your vocals, this is where you process your vocals. A quick note for the Don Toliver style again is obviously you want to do compression, EQ, all that kind of stuff. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure he records on a Sony C800 because his vocals are very bright. So like the only note that I would have if you want to achieve a Don Toliver styled vocal is to make sure you do have something where you could boost the treble nicely. So I'm using this Acoustica purple EQ. It's like a Pultec EQ, and I'm boosting about like 12k, 2-3 dBs. But it's always going to change from song to song. But you could also use the Slate Digital Fresh Air. That's a free plugin, I believe, right here. This is a free one. You could boost the higher on this, but just don't get too carried away. The mid air is kind of good too. So that's like a free alternative. Going back to the reverb, all the vocals are routing to this lead bus, and then this lead bus is being sent to this plate vert. So for this lead right here, we have this decay time and then this pre-delay. And then one thing I want you guys to know to calculate your reverb times is you could use this simple equation. So you just do 7,500 divided by whatever your BPM is. So right here, our BPM is 140. We're going to divide that, and then boom, we get a value. What is this? So the way that I like to think of this is if the decimal place is right here on this side of the number, and you just divide it, that's what's going to give you your pre-delay time. As you can see, look, it looks the same. So that's why my pre-delay is 26.78 because that's how I calculated it. When you calculate your pre-delay times like this, it's like you set the pre-delay in notes, because if you open up a delay plugin, it's locked into the grid, right? So when you're calculating these pre-delay times, it's like you're kind of like setting it to a certain grid value of the BPM. But you don't have to dwell on it too much. Just know that that's the equation. And then if you want to get your decay time, you can multiply that by 2 until you get a certain value. So now when you have 3 digits, you can get this and then move this decimal place 2 over. So it would be 1.07, but to me that's too short. So I multiplied it by 2 and I got 2.14, but this is 2.37. So why is it a little bit longer? Because if we multiply it by 2 again, it'll be 428. So the reason why I did this move is because if you listen to a lot of the Don Toliver mixes and the vocals, he has a really kind of like long tail at the end of his vocals. So if I were to play this vocal again right here at the end of this phrase, you're going to hear the tail at the end of it that shines through in the spaces between. So this is what it sounds like soloed.
Call it Sleepy Hollow.
So that little bright tail, like I wanted it a little bit longer. So basically that's what the decay time does when you set the tail. That's 2.37. Before we get to any of the sends that I have here, because these are all sends, I want to go over now like the background layers. Another note too is if you want to achieve any style of any artist, you kind of have to record like that artist. Let's say if you wanted to get like a Pop Smoke vocal, you can't get a Pop Smoke vocal unless you sound like Pop Smoke. You have to have that voice and that cadence. Same thing with just like the ideas that you piece together. So it's like if you want a Don Toliver styled vocal, you have to have the layers kind of similar to Don Toliver. But this is why this mix works very well, because as you can see, we have a lot of little elements that are going on in the background. So Don Toliver, he does have a lot of background layers that are just kind of like humming and doing a lot of melodic things and ad-libs going left and right and this and that. So let's just break that down. So I muted the lead for the pre-hook, and then we're just gonna go straight into this. So this is the pre-hook background. So if I solo it by itself, this is what it sounds like. Let me solo that again, and then let me play it without any of these effects on. All we're gonna hear is the auto-tune. You're still hearing a little bit of the reverb because again it's routed to the leads and the leads are still routed to this, so you're still hearing a little bit of this plate verb, but with nothing is pretty much dry, it's just dead in the center. So how do we go about fixing that to make it sound more unique like the Don Toliver style? What I did was I got this first EQ and then I just took out some of the lows, but the reason why I took out the lows and I compressed it because I wanted to sit tight in a pocket for when I hit it with this, which is the doubler. So we're going to be using this a lot throughout this video. This is a very good plugin to basically get that mono signal and then spread it out to the sides. This is how you get like that wide sounding nice lush vocal effects. This plugin is very simple. When you load it up, it already kind of just loads in like this, but what I like to do with this plugin is I think it loads in like this, like by default. I'll just filter out the lows because again I don't want any lows on the sides. I only want just kind of like that higher upper mids and high end to be shining through. And then if you look over here, we have this graph, so it's showing you the voicings or the voices that we have. So we have this center voice, and then we have the left and the right. And then if you want to control the level of how loud you want the sides to be, you can literally just click and drag, highlight these two, and then move them up and down. So if it's down, you're not really gonna hear it. So if you turn it up, then you're going to hear more of the voices on the side that it's creating. So I'm going to just turn off the center voice, and then I'm going to just show you what the sides are doing so you can hear. So you're only hearing the voice on the sides now. You're not hearing it in the center because I took out this center button right here. And if you couldn't hear that, make sure you're listening on headphones or a set of speakers so that way you can hear what the effect actually sounds like. But so with this, what I did was I highlighted this and I just dragged it down a little bit so it's not too much. So we still have like the lead in the middle, and then we have the two on the side. So then you get the whole sound sounding like this. So we still have a little bit of reverb on it, but I want to push it more in the background. So again, with that calculator thing, I calculated the time and then I got 428, so it's a longer tail, and then it's the same pre-delay, and I just turned the mix up more so it sounds more distant in the background. This is how Don Toliver does it. If that lead vocal is in the center and then the backgrounds are on the sides, then it creates that like depth and separation, which is something that is favorable and is what you want. And then if you put reverb on that now, so now it's like even pushing it further back into the space. That's what reverb does if you know how to dial it in properly. So then you get this. So it's a longer tail and it sounds like it's just further back in the mix. If we play that with the lead, you'll be able to hear it. This is what it sounds like with both of them on.
Chop off the top, call it Sleepy Hollow. I was on my way, she said, baby, how long? Rockstar like she from the hills. Take this tan rock, tell me how it feels.
So that's that. And then with the ad-libs that Don Toliver has, so I'm gonna just mute these two now, and then I'm gonna just play these ad-libs right here, which is the pre-hook high backgrounds. So of course auto-tune on all your things because we're using auto-tune. I mean, it's 2020 whatever, so you got to use auto-tune. And then basically what I did again was filtering and compressing because I just wanted to sit in a pocket. The reason why I use a compressor as well is because if you don't have a compressor and you have certain ad-libs are very dynamic. Like somebody could be going like yeah like super loud, and then out of nowhere they'll just get loud. And if you're not taming those dynamics, then it's gonna stick out in the mix and it's gonna be jarring to the ear, or it's just gonna stick out like a sore thumb, which is basically what this compressor is doing. It's preventing it from sticking out like a sore thumb. But that's why with the backgrounds I'm always compressing them, so that way they're just stuck in that pocket to let that vocal shine through and be nice and bright front and center, all those good things. And then I put this decapitator last. I'll get back to this decapitator and why I used it, but let's just like kind of like bypass this like if it's not there, because I reached for Pan Man and then the reverb. So reverb is the same thing as the pre-hook background. This one right here is just to kind of give it more depth and dimension. But then with the Pan Man, what I did was I have it panning left and right. Let me just play that for you real quick so you guys can get an idea of what that sounds like by itself. Make sure you guys are wearing headphones again or on your speakers or wherever, but it's panning left and right. So the reason why we're doing that is because there's a lot of moving parts to Don Toliver's vocals. There are a lot of moving parts, and this is just one section. We have the leads, we have the backgrounds, and then we have, like, I guess we'll just call these ad-libs for right now. So that's what that's doing. I mean, same principles apply, very simple, straight to the point. But then the reason why I used decapitator and I cranked it this high was because I felt like when it was being played with everything else, you weren't really able to hear what those ad-libs were saying or doing. So I just wanted to get a little bit more saturation, and when you saturate something, it kind of like brings up the harmonics, so that way the ear picks it up easier in the mix. I wanted to hear that a little bit more, which is why after I threw all this stuff on, I just went back and I threw on decapitator right here, so that way we could hear it. So now let me play all three of these parts at once, and then we'll get into what the sends are looking like for this part.
Chop off the top, call it Sleepy Hollow. I was on my way, she said, baby, how long? Rockstar like she from the hills. Take this tan rock, tell me how it feels.
And then I'm gonna just play that one time with you without any of these effects on, so you could just hear what everything sounds like raw, basically.
Chop off the top, call it Sleepy Hollow. I was on my way, she said, baby, how long? Rockstar like she from the hills. Take this tan rock, tell me how it feels.
So that tell me what it feels like ad-lib is part of the hook, so you still heard it on the side, but for the most part, everything was just in the dead center. And when you have everything in the dead center, it's obviously a taste thing, but when everything's in the dead center, it could become very distracting. So with all these moves that we're doing, we're positioning our vocals in different spots within the mix to give it that kind of energy, life, and flavor, okay? So the next thing that I want to go into is the sends. I have some sends over here, okay? But when we get to that section, we'll get to that section. But I also have sends right here, because one thing that Don Toliver does in a lot of his songs throughout his whole catalog is he'll have sends of effects. So these purple tracks right here are basically my sends. Let's just start off with this quarter throw delay. So what does this mean, this quarter throw delay? So right here on Pro Tools or whatever DAW you use, just figure out how to use a send. But I bust it to this quarter throw delay right here, this first one. And basically what it's doing is it's getting the signal of this and then sending it to this bus right here. And then when it sends it to this bus, what do I have on this bus? I have a H delay with a compressor. The reason why I have this H delay and it's a quarter note is because, as you can see, the value of the quarter note is right here. So if I solo this and then at the end of Don Toliver's phrases or words where there's like spaces in between word to word, you could hear a lot of echoes, and that's basically what we're doing. We're echoing the end bits of his words, which is what he does in his mixes. So as you can see, it'll sound like this.
Call it Sleepy Hollow. I was on my way, she said, baby, how long? Rockstar like she from the hills. Take this tan rock, tell me how it feels.
So how did I do that? Basically, you have to automate it. So on Pro Tools, what you do is if you have this little button, you click it right here, and then you could select your send. And then I just automated the level, so that way every time I reached the end of these words, I just dragged it out, and then I highlighted the word that I wanted to send. And then basically I click and I drag up, and then that's how I get the effect to turn on and engage. So basically what this delay is doing is it's in the center. But one thing I want you guys to keep note of is that yes, within different sections it sounds different. So you could also see Don Toliver doing something like this where he'll ping pong it. So instead of the delay being in the center, it'll ping pong left and right. So let's play that with the ping pong on now.
Sleepy Hollow, I was on my way, she said, baby, how long? Rockstar like she from the hills. Take this tan rock, tell me how it feels.
And then you could also play with the delay time. Sometimes he also does the 8th note, but again, it's different for every song. You just have to like judge it based off of your own taste and what works best for your song. So this is what it sounds like.
Sleepy Hollow, I was on my way, she said, baby, how long? Rockstar like she from the hills. Take this tan rock, tell me how it feels.
But for this case, we're just going to keep it at a quarter, and we're going to keep it mono for this beginning part of the song. And the reason why I put a compressor on it is because if you see some of these words, he's coming off them a little bit harder. So if I take off the compressor, it's going to stick out a little bit more on certain phrases of the delay.
Sleepy Hollow, I was on my way, she said, baby, how long? Rockstar like she from the hills. Take this tan rock, tell me how it feels.
So you hear it more on that last one. So as you can see, when he says feels, all of these are pretty consistent, but when he says feels, the delay for feels is way louder. It goes feels, 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 and then this is again that sticking out like a sore thumb. You don't want anything to stick out like a sore thumb. You want it to be kind of tucked. So that's why I put the compressor after the delay. So if we play it again.
Hollow, I was on my way, she said, baby, how long? Rockstar like she from the hills. Take this tan rock, tell me how it feels.
Boom, like magic. Everything is just leveled out. You get what I'm saying? So that's why I put the compressor in this case after, and it just depends again source by source. Sometimes you may not even need a compressor. Don't do this every time if it's not sticking out like how I showed you. But if it is sticking out, then that's just a tool that you could reach for that you could put after your delay. So now that we have all that done, I'll play it one more time and then we'll transition into the hook section of the song.
Chop off the top, call it Sleepy Hollow. I was on my way, she said, baby, how long? Rockstar like she from the hills. Take this tan rock, tell me how it feels.
Okay, now onto this hook. So what we did with the doubler, right, on the background layer, you could also do it for your lead vocals, and that's what he does sometimes. Sometimes his hooks are nice and wide and big, and it sounds like there's multiple voices, so you could achieve that with the doubler. So same thing, you just throw it on. I just filter out a little bit of the lows, right, at 84 hertz or 80 hertz, and then it boosts a little bit of the highs, and then you just adjust this to taste. So I'm gonna mute the backgrounds, and then I'm gonna mute these sends real quick too. This is what it sounds like without the doubler.
Off the pill, off the pill, off the pill. Off the pill, off the pill, off the pill. Rockstar like she from the hills. You ain't gotta tell me like, just keep it real.
So that sounds pretty cool, but we can add more excitement to it, and we're gonna get that excitement from the doubler. For the hook, you want the hook to have a certain impact and you want it to be wide. So with the doubler on it, it's gonna spread everything out into the sides, and you're gonna have the center and the sides, and everything's gonna be going at once. So let's hear what that sounds like.
It feels off the pill, off the pill, off the pill. Off the pill, off the pill, off the pill.
But it still kind of sounds weird. Why does it sound weird? Because it still sounds a little bit dry. So even though all of these are running to the lead bus and it's still getting a little bit of the plate reverb, I created another send for the hook reverb right here. And then all I did for the hook reverb was make the decay longer, because if we go down to the plate reverb, this is for the verses. For some of your verses, you don't want too much of a big tailed decayed reverb, because then it's going to get in the way of the verse and it's going to be too distracting. If you guys aren't familiar with Pro Tools, it says what track we have it on. So this is the plate reverb and this is the hook reverb. So the plate reverb I'm kind of using for the verses since it's shorter, And then for the hook reverb, I just used a bigger, longer decayed reverb. Okay, so it's at 4.28 seconds versus 2.37 seconds, meaning that it's gonna take longer on the hook reverb to just die out, which is what Don Toliver does a lot of the time. So if I throw just this hook reverb on now, this is what we're working with.
It feels off the pill, 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 off the pill. Rockstar like she from the hills. You ain't gotta tell me like just keep it real. Off the pill, 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 off the pill. Rockstar like she from the hills. You ain't gotta tell me like just keep it real.
Okay, so that's for the hook, but then what we could also use to add a little bit more bounce to it, what I like to do is put a quarter note delay. So this quarter note delay is this one right here, and then what we're using is just Echo Boy Jr. You can use any delay you want, but it's a quarter note delay, and this quarter note delay gives it the bounce. So if I mute the reverb and just play the delay, you could hear that right here.
Off the pill, off the pill, off the pill.
It's that echoing effect. With all those added together, we have the hall reverb, quarter delay, doubler. This is what the hook sounds like. This is what you get as a result.
Feels off the pill, 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 off the pill. Rockstar like she from the hills. You ain't gotta tell me like just keep it real. Off the pill, off the pill, off the pill.
So that's what we have for the hook. And then as far as the ad-libs go on the hook, it's pretty much the same thing as what we did right here for the background layers. It's literally the same thing. The only thing that I added a little bit different was after the reverb that I put on, I added this another delay, but with the mix turned down a little bit, so that way it has a little bit of like a bouncing effect. So if I mute these,
Tell me what it feel like. Tell me what it feel like.
now that we have all that for the hook, now we can move over to this verse section. So this is just kind of like a little freestyle thing that I did. This is just playing off of the fact that there is a lot of throws, sends, and all this kind of stuff within a Don Toliver style mix. So all I did was, it was the same thing as the pre-hook lead that we did over here. It's another send. I'm just sending this signal to a quarter throw delay, but then on the verse I created another throw delay, so this is quarter throw delay 2. All of these sections of the verse are being sent to this quarter note throw delay, and then I just processed it a little bit different. That's why I didn't send it to the first one. I created a new one, and then with this new one I just wanted it to have like a different kind of feel and sound. So I used Echo Boy on a quarter note, and then I just basically kind of filtered out a lot of the highs, but I kind of left a little bit of the lows shine through. And then as you can see, then I filtered it out some more, and then I just threw a little bit of reverb on the quarter throw delay, so just like a tiny bit, not too much, which is what gives me this sound. So it's a little bit different than the first one. The first one was more open. If you can hear this one right here,
I was on my way, she said, baby, how long? Rockstar.
because that's another thing too. The amount of frequencies that Don Toliver lets through when he has his delays going on is, if I were to open this one right here, there's a lot of high end that gets let through because it just kind of sits in a certain pocket. But for this one over here, I wanted it to sit in a different pocket, which is I wanted it to sound like more filtered and muffled, kind of like behind something, so it sounds like bill, 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 bill. So that's what it's doing. And then as far as the backgrounds for these go, I just, again, we're using the doubler. I just threw a doubler on here, and then on this doubler, since we already have these doing the main one, and this is just like a basically plain lead vocal with these right here on this one, when I threw the doubler on, I didn't want the center information, so it's just strictly only the sides that are being played right here. And that's what gives it more of that like stereo excitement. So then when you mix that with the lead, this is what you get. And then if I were to take off the doubler on the backgrounds, everything would just be in the center. which it still sounds kind of cool because the delay is spread out in the sides too, which is another cool thing about this Echo Boy plugin. Is if you go right here and you click the tweak button, you can see the width. You can make it mono, or you could by default it's set right here, so it sounds a little bit wider. But that's what I did for this section of the verse, so this is what it sounds like. I'll play from over here.
These women love me everywhere, guess I appeal. I took that bed right off the lot, look how it pill. Marlin, baby, tell me what's the deal. I don't feel you even if I'm off the. Tell me.
And there you go. So what else did we hear here? So this is the next thing that I want to get into. In Don Toliver's music, he does have a lot of smooth transitions from one section into another. So right here, I did a reverse reverb. So basically, this is what we're hearing before the last hook hits. So how do we achieve that? So right here, I have this EQ. I'm just filtering things out. I just want it only on the sides. You guys are already familiar with doubler. And then decapitate, I'm just saturating a little bit so it sticks out a little bit more in the mix. But how did we even get this sample to begin with? So I'm going to just playlist this right here real quick, and then I'm going to show you how I achieved that. So if you guys are using different DAWs, you just got to have to type in reverse reverb effect for whatever DAW you're using. But if you're in Pro Tools, you are in luck because I'm going to show you. So basically, this is the beginning of the hook right here, right? So all you do is you just break it down and then hold Alt and then drag it down, or Option and drag it down. And then I like to hold Shift to select a region. So on Pro Tools, basically we duplicated this down here and then we selected a region because the reverb is going to affect all of this. So it's going to swell into this part. So then on Pro Tools, you have Audio Suite. So we're going to use our Audio Suites plugins, and then we're going to go to Reverb, and then I just select Deverb. And then I leave the gain at 0, and then as far as the time goes, we can bring up the calculator again because we just want a long decay time. So basically, this is what I got, but then I just multiplied it by 2, and then I got 8.57. So you could type that in here. So 8.57 is going to give you 8.6. You have to make sure you have this region highlighted, because if you don't have it highlighted, it's not going to print to the whole thing. It'll just print to just this clip if you have only this clip. So after you have all that highlighted, you have it set, then you just click reverse. Boom, and now we have this. But as you can still see, there's that word pill that it's in there. So you don't necessarily want that word pill. So you just kind of like cut it right here, and then you could like fade it out, and then with everything together. And then what I did here was I just sliced this bit and then I just faded it right here. So that's kind of how I got that sound.
I don't feel even if I'm off
the last quick thing, this is like a bonus tip, bonus effect, is on certain parts of Don Toliver's songs, he does a deep pitch effect. So this is what we did on the outro right here. You could also use this. This is Little Alter Boy. If you do not have Little Alter Boy, I'm going to show you real quick. You could also use Vocal Bender by Waves. So what we did on Little Alter Boy on this section is, let me just solo it real quick so you could hear it. So it's just like a deep voice formant pitch shifting effect. So all you have to do to get that is you hit this link button, and then it starts off at 0, right? So it's just basically the hook copied over, pitched all the way down, and then the mix isn't at 100. The mix is at 45.5 on this song. You just play with it however you want. Super simple. Boom, you got your effect. You're done. That's all you need. What I like about this plugin too, again, is this drive feature. So if I turn off the drive feature and I play with the entirety of the mix, all you have is this. You can't really hear that deep pitch effect, so that's why I like doing the drive feature on this, and then I just drove it up, and then now it sticks out a little bit more, because again, that's what saturation is. It's when you want your ears to pick it up a little bit more because of those harmonics. But enough of that nerd talk. Boom. And that is how you get Don Toliver Style Vocals. So I hope that video helps you guys. Again, if you guys have any specific questions on anything that I went over in this video, please feel free to let me know. And if you guys want to know how to do other vocal effects from other artists, just again in the comments, let me know. One quick thing that I want to close out with here is that each song is different, and just because you do the same style effects as another artist doesn't mean that it'll necessarily work for you. So if you want to figure out something that works best for you, I highly recommend that you work with an engineer to kind of do all that kind of stuff for you and have that kind of thinking for you. So if you want to get a mix done, you can feel free to reach out to me and we can get a mix going for you. Another thing too that I wanted to bring up is if you want to learn how to record and use Pro Tools like a professional yourself, feel free to check out the brand new Pro Tools recording course. I just created this. I put everything that I know about recording into it, so there's a lot of knowledge and value there. So if you found a lot of knowledge from this video, you'll most definitely find way more knowledge and value in that whole course. So that's just a few things that I wanted you guys to keep in mind. With all that being said, have fun, keep creating music. Don't forget to check out my boy Mike Tabinski at The Bunker. He's also another fellow engineer that you could check out. I'm gonna tag all his stuff in the description below. But without further ado, if you want to learn some more vocal effects, feel free to check out this next video right here. It should be here somewhere, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.